We're looking at a case today where there's really no mystery about who did it. A man has already confessed to a truly horrific crime. The real drama here, the part we're diving into, isn't about guilt or innocence. It's about that ultimate question of justice. Should he spend his life in a cell, or should he be sentenced to death?
Just listen to these opening words from the prosecution. It's an incredibly powerful way to start. What the district attorney, James Staton, is doing with this one sentence is framing the entire trial. He's telling the jury, look, don't expect the truth from this man. The only thing he got right was admitting he killed her. And just like that, the focus shifts away from, did he do it, to, can we believe a single thing he says about why he did it?
Before we get into all the legal strategies, we've got to ground ourselves in the heartbreaking, undisputed facts of what happened to 7-year-old Athena Strand.
Yeah, the timeline here is just tragically fast. In November of 2022, a 7-year-old girl just vanishes from her home. 2 agonizing days later, her body is found. Now, the legal process, that takes much longer, but eventually, the man responsible, Tanner Horner, he pleads guilty. And with that single plea, the entire focus of the justice system pivots from proving guilt to deciding on the right punishment. And then you hear this detail, and it's just devastating. The package that Horner was there to deliver that day was a Christmas gift for Athena. It was a box of You Can Be Anything Barbies, a symbol of all the future she would never, ever get to have.
Okay, so let's get into the prosecution's strategy. Their entire case for the death penalty. Really, it all came down to proving one thing, that Tanner Horner's first story was a calculated lie made up to hide a much, much darker truth. Let's break down how they took it apart, piece by piece. So this is the first story Tanner Horner gives the police, a tragic accident. He claims he was backing up his delivery van, he accidentally hit Athena, and then he just panicked. You know, it paints this picture of a guy who just made a terrible, fear-driven mistake. But the prosecution? They weren't buying it for a second. They called it an absolute lie.
And this is why they were so sure it was a lie. I mean, the evidence just told a totally different and frankly much more sinister story. First, it was a camera inside the van that actually showed Athena alive and uninjured after the so-called accident. Second, she fought back. His DNA was under her fingernails. And finally, Horner's own confession revealed a brutal, deliberate act. He admitted he strangled her only after trying to break her neck didn't work. This wasn't panic, not even close.
And with a statement like this, just listen. The prosecution wanted to completely erase any idea of a man who just panicked. They wanted the jury to see, to visualize, the brutal physics of what happened. A 250-pound man overpowering a 67-pound child. They're trying to paint a picture here, and it's not one of a mistake. It's one of a monster.
All right, so that's the prosecution's argument, right? A calculated, brutal predator who deserves the ultimate punishment. But then you have the defense, and they came at this from a completely different angle. They couldn't argue his innocence. Instead, they argued for mercy. They made a case for life in prison, not death.
This quote from the defense attorney, this is really the heart of their entire argument. Look, they made a really strategic choice here. They knew the evidence was overwhelming and terrible, their words. So instead, they argued that the key to understanding what happened wasn't what he did that day, but a lifetime of invisible injuries to his brain. So how did they build this case? Well, they presented what are called mitigating factors in a capital trial. These are reasons that, while they don't excuse the crime, might argue against the death penalty. They painted this picture of a deeply troubled life, talking about his mother's alcohol use during pregnancy, an autism diagnosis, a history of mental illness, even exposure to a massive amount of lead. Their whole point was that all of this stuff combined to create a person with a fundamentally damaged brain, someone who just couldn't think rationally when everything went wrong. So yeah, this is what it all comes down to for the jury. They're basically looking at 2 completely different stories trying to explain one horrific act, and they have to decide which one rings true. So you've got the prosecution on one side saying this was a cunning predator who lied to cover his tracks, and then you have the defense saying, no, this was a broken man whose damaged brain caused him to panic and do something monstrous. And honestly, the punishment they choose, it's all going to come down to which of those 2 pictures feels more real to them. It's also worth pointing out just how much this case rocked the local community. I mean, the outrage in this small, rural county was so high, so intense, that the trial actually had to be moved to the much bigger city of Fort Worth. It was a legal necessity, really, all to find a jury that might not have already made up their minds from all the media coverage.
So here we are. It all comes down to this one huge decision. They've heard both sides. and now they go back to decide. And what they decide will be one of two fates for Tanner Horner: the irreversible finality of the death penalty, or a life spent behind bars with absolutely no chance of parole.
And this really leaves us with the central question of the whole trial, doesn't it? When there's no doubt about guilt and the crime is just unspeakable, what does justice actually look like? Is it about retribution, a life for a life? Or is there room for mercy, an acknowledgement that there might be a broken person behind a monstrous act? That's what the jury had to wrestle with. And honestly, it's a question we're all left to think about too.